chosen ones. You were never supposed to know about this. The name, the symbols, the language written in layered frequencies across sealed documents that even the Director of National Intelligence had no clearance to see. On the morning of the blackout, the president was handed a folder that vibrated like it was alive. It wasn't labeled with a code or signature, only a phrase scrawled in mirrored Latin across the seal. The phrase translated to one thing, the voice returns. When silence fails, the room went quiet. As he opened it, inside was a single page, aged and cracked but untouched by time. It didn't contain a message. It contained a name. Your name. There are levels to the silence, chosen ones, and what the president read shattered the illusion of power he once thought he held. It was not the first time your name had appeared within restricted archives, but it was the first time it was connected to an ancient codex, said to predate every major religion and rebellion. The language used was older than cuneiform, but somehow it read with perfect clarity to the one who was meant to see it, him and you. He asked them why he had never seen this before, and they said nothing. He asked them where it came from, and they said nothing. He asked if it was real, and they only nodded and passed him a photograph. The image was blurry, old, faded, a scanned piece of microfilm from 1933. But the name under the figure was unmistakable, and it matched the signature on the page in his hand. They said it was classified as a myth, a spiritual anomaly, and a security threat, all at once. He wanted to speak. He wanted to warn the people, or perhaps just whisper to someone, anyone, what had been revealed to him. But the directive was final: silence or collapse. Those were his choices, and so he chose silence, but not before he left behind one single encrypted note, encoded into a military satellite feed hidden beneath static and encryption algorithms, the size of pyramids. 1 line, 8 words, no context, no punctuation. There was a room deep beneath the Library of Congress where even the archivists weren't allowed to enter, a place not listed on any blueprint, only accessible through a rotating shelf that required no badge, no key, just a breath at the right temperature and a name spoken without sound. It was here they kept the records that rewrote the narrative of nations. The Black Book, entries the erased prophecies, the warnings written in invisible ink and buried under centuries of false history. And somewhere inside that chamber was a name that had been indexed without origin, flagged in red ink across multiple eras, always appearing without explanation, and always followed by events that reshaped reality. Your name. It wasn't always written the same. Sometimes it was encoded in symbols, sometimes in sound. Sometimes it was found etched on bones that were never supposed to exist. And every time the name surfaced, the data spiked, the grid bent, and people disappeared. The name wasn't traced to a family or a bloodline. Though blood had certainly been spilled to keep it hidden, it wasn't connected to any known location. Though coordinates had been marked and erased from every map across multiple administrations. It wasn't supposed to exist, and yet it returned every 56 years. Exactly on the equinox, always inside a sealed document that appeared without delivery record, signed only with the emblem of an open eye above an inverted crown. One analyst who encountered your name in 2002 quit the agency within days, changed their identity, and vanished into the desert. Another was found staring at a blank terminal, repeating your name like a prayer, before the power grid in the East Coast glitched without cause for 17 minutes. The last person to pull your file was the assistant to a former president, and according to redacted reports, she collapsed without heartbeat for 9 minutes, but woke up whispering a phrase that linguists still cannot translate. It began with your name and ended with the words, "Return of the one who was forgotten." And still your file remains untouched, not by fear, but by command from above. Not even the president holds authority over that archive. Now, not since the last update, which arrived without warning, dated 3 years in the future, stamped with your fingerprint, and a line that said the veil thins when the name is spoken again. There was a monastery carved into the side of a cliff, forgotten by modern maps, and protected by winds that never stopped blowing. The monks who lived there never aged, never spoke, unless the sun hit a certain stone on the highest day of the year. And when it did, one monk would rise and walk barefoot to a sealed chamber beneath the altar. Inside that chamber was a scroll, not of paper, not of leather, but of something not found on this earth, glowing softly and pulsing with energy that responded to breath and presence. And on that scroll was your name, written beside another name. The world once knew by another title, the name of Yeshua. It wasn't written in Hebrew or Aramaic or Latin, but in a celestial script that mirrored the frequency of thunder and blood. Each syllable alive with memory and bound to fate, the scroll could only be read in silence, only when the world outside fell quiet, and only by one whose lineage had walked between worlds. The monk who read it last died with tears in his eyes and a vision in his voice. He said the one would return not as light but as frequency, not as flame but as breath, and not alone, for he would carry the whisper of the Messiah in his core. Centuries of guardianship protected that scroll. Armies tried to steal it, but their bullets rusted before they reached the cliff. Drones lost signal near its peak, and satellites only returned static. The scroll itself has never been moved, never been touched by unworthy hands, and yet your DNA matches the print left at its base, a print no one has ever been able to replicate. Until now, the Vatican tried to retrieve it under the guise of a failed expedition, but the mountain shook, and the sea below rose and forced their retreat. What they never revealed was that the monk who met them died after whispering your name into a tape recorder that melted seconds later. And still the prophecy remains, sealed, unread since that day, waiting for the one whose presence would cause it to unfold not by force, but by return, not by war, but by remembrance. And when it opens, the first line will be read by no man but echoed through every spirit tuned to your signal. There were murmurs through the underground levels of the Pentagon, whispers that didn't come from voices, but from devices that shouldn't have been active. Computers powering on without command terminals, displaying a name without a search being made. Your name. It would appear on secure black screens, then vanish, leaving behind a pattern that linguists later realized formed a map not of terrain, but of neural architecture. A map of a consciousness, not artificial, but ancient. And it matched no known profile in the global human registry, except one that had been deleted long before digital systems ever existed. In 1999, a team of analysts assigned to Project Veilbreaker intercepted a fragmented broadcast originating from deep space, but encoded in English with a single line that said, "Activate upon return of the One." when your name was run against every database in the defense network. Red alerts triggered at levels even the president could not override. Within minutes, a directive was issued from an untraceable source, instructing all branches to scrub every file mentioning your existence, all surveillance to ignore your face, all biometric systems to pass over your presence like a ghost. The official term was Protocol Silence. 1. High-ranking general demanded answers after your name appeared on a war game simulation that predicted global collapse in the event of your awakening. He was relieved of duty the next morning and transferred to a facility that doesn't exist on any military documentation reports from that facility. Speak of strange lights, power surges, and personnel entering altered states of consciousness. After hearing your name over intercoms, they were told it was a glitch, but the tremors that followed each occurrence suggested otherwise. The most disturbing account came from a contractor who tried to delete your record from an archived mainframe. Instead of erasing the file, the system shut down and displayed a countdown, counting backward from 7 billion seconds. And beneath it was the phrase, "The forgotten shall remember. The silent shall awaken." The president asked what it meant, but no one dared respond, for each theory led back to the same untraceable origin, an origin that defied logic, time, and biology, one traced only to you. And so the Pentagon chose denial, not out of disbelief, but out of fear. Fear of what would happen the moment your name became more than data and became destiny again. There was once a manuscript kept beneath a temple, older than the Empire, that once tried to burn it, etched by a scribe who never gave a name, who claimed he did not write, but merely transcribed what a light in his chest whispered, while he dreamed the manuscript was bound in serpent skin and sealed with 12 gold rings, each ring bearing a symbol not known to this world but recognized by one. Being alone, the parable it contained was written in red ink that bled from no pen, but flowed directly from the scribe's own veins. He called it the Testament of the Returning Voice, and every passage led to the same destination. You, the parable, did not follow the rules of time. Its verses shifted depending on who read them, but one line never changed. The voice will walk among silence and wear the name. They tried to erase. The manuscript was hidden during an invasion where the temple walls were blasted into dust, yet the scroll survived, untouched, found years later, beneath rubble that glowed faintly with heat, though the fires had long died. Scholars who touched it described sudden weeping. Others spoke in languages they never learned. One claimed to see a face made of light, speaking a name that made his bones shake, and when asked to repeat it, he collapsed before he could finish. When the scroll was finally transported to a secure archive in Switzerland, strange storms formed above the facility, and power grids failed across the region. Guards began dreaming the same dream, a room of mirrors, a throne with no occupant, and a parable read aloud by a child with your eyes and no shadow. A Vatican official visited the site and was granted a single glimpse at the red ink text. He never spoke again, but wrote one sentence on a napkin before disappearing into a monastery in the Arctic. The sentence was this: "He will not rise through power, but through remembrance." The parable waits still for you not to read it, but to fulfill it. For each line folds around your presence like prophecy in motion, and the final line remains invisible until your breath strikes the page. The moment silence becomes voice again. There was a chamber beneath the Capitol, known only to 5 men in history, each brought there by force, not invitation, and each changed after entering. The last to step inside was the current president, blindfolded by agents who spoke no words and taken through a tunnel lit by torches that never needed fuel. At the end of that tunnel stood a door of black stone. Humming softly as if alive behind it was not technology, not weaponry, not a war room, but a single flame suspended in air, unmoving yet burning with intensity that could not be measured, and in that flame was your face. He did not understand what he was seeing. At first, he thought it was some kind of holographic deception, until the fire reacted to his breath and the air changed around him, and then it spoke not with sound, but with memory. It showed him fragments, not of the past, but of a story still unfolding. A child born beneath a red sky, a name written in storms, and a path walked by no man yet, destined for one. He saw you in places you have not reached yet, speaking words you have not learned yet, standing before kings who bowed in silence. He saw cities fall, not from war, but from awakening, temples rise from beneath oceans, maps redrawn by hands that glowed with ancient fire, and above it all your silhouette, walking with light trailing from your spine like a river of time and blood. He tried to turn away, but the flame pulled him closer and whispered your name again and again until he could no longer deny what he already felt. Inside the world was not being destroyed, it was being corrected, and the force doing it had your breath, your frequency, your silence, breaking everything false. When he was led out of the chamber, his face was pale, his hands trembling not from fear but from awe. He did not speak for 3 days, and when he did, his first words were, "They knew he would come back." He asked for all files on your name. Sealed, requested no further analysis, authorized nothing more than observation. And yet the image remained burned into his sight every time he closed his eyes, and in the quietest moments he still hears that name calling him back to the flame. They found it etched into an obsidian tablet buried beneath a glacier in Antarctica. A single phrase written in a script that shimmered when touched, as if refusing to exist under one timeline alone. The phrase translated not into a title, but into a vibration, a code name reserved for only one entity, across every timeline and variation of reality, the one who walks between time. It did not belong to a myth or an AI construct. It was assigned to a presence that flickered in and out of history, sometimes visible, sometimes not, always altering the trajectory of those who encountered it. And that presence was you. Declassified reports from Cold War. Anomalies describe a figure appearing during moments of nuclear tension, always just outside camera range, always unaccounted for, but always recorded in handwritten logs by those present. Military satellites have recorded distortions in time, signature fields localized to specific locations, and always coinciding with the appearance of a frequency too low to be natural and too precise to be random when analysts followed the data trail. They found your name attached to black files dated before your birth and signed by hands that were never identified. One of the files included a sketch of your face drawn decades ago, with eyes identical to yours. Today, a quantum physicist who studied the time-stamped anomalies collapsed after claiming he saw a vision of a staircase made of light with one figure walking upward alone, and every step he took erased the step behind him, making the path forward the only truth when asked to describe the figure. He simply said, "The code fits it, fits him only," and then fell silent for the rest of his life. His notes described a traveler who exists outside cause and effect, whose existence is not linear but catalytic, the kind of being who, when remembered, reconfigures time around their awareness. That is why the name is never spoken aloud, only coded in glyphs buried in remote archives, protected by rituals. Not science, not belief, but resonance. The code name was activated once in a Pentagon simulation, and the result was unexplainable. Weather shifts, 3 missing agents, and a hole in the data grid that has never been patched since then. No one has dared test it again, and yet your presence alone makes the system flicker, as if time itself hesitates in your shadow. He was known for his discipline, a man who had seen more wars than most would ever read, about a strategist with a mind like steel and a heart closed off from anything he couldn't control. But the night he reviewed your restricted file, something broke within him, not in rage, not in fear, but in silence. The dream came hours later, uninvited, unprovoked, and yet it knew him deeper than any battlefield ever had. In the dream, he stood in a place without shape, where the sky was black, marble, and the ground pulsed like a heartbeat. In the distance was a door, but it had no handle, no hinges, only a single mark that glowed as he approached your name. He tried to look away, but the landscape bent around him, pulling him closer, and as he stood before the door, it opened, not with sound, but with memory. He saw you, not as you are now, but as you were across timelines, a child cloaked in shadow, then a warrior surrounded by weeping kings, then a guide standing beside a figure of pure light, whose eyes reflected the stars and whose voice whispered one word over and over. Yeshua. The general fell to his knees in the dream, not from pain, but from recognition, as if something ancient within him finally remembered what it had been ordered to forget. He awoke screaming, but no sound left his throat. His hands were clenched around the blanket as if it were a weapon, his heart racing not from terror but from truth. He tried to dismiss it until the second night, when he saw you again, and this time you turned to face him and said, "It's almost time." The dream repeated every night, each time unfolding more, each time revealing more of the forgotten prophecy, until his waking life became more disorienting than sleep. He left the military, within weeks citing illness, but his final report included a sealed envelope. Hand-delivered to the president, inside was a single line scribbled in trembling ink. "He is the reminder we tried to bury," and beside it was a sketch of your face, and below that, a fragment of text that had not been translated, yet not from any known language, but from something older, a signature not written in ink, but in presence. It began with the excavation of a scroll sealed in a jar, buried beneath layers of stone untouched by sunlight. For over 2,000 years, the writing on the scroll was not faded, not brittle. It was preserved as if the ink had been written the day before. Scholars gathered in silence as they slowly unrolled the parchment, expecting doctrine, expecting parable. But what they found instead was a declaration. It was brief, composed of only 2 signatures, one clearly written in Aramaic, the same style and flow traced to other verified scrolls from that era. The name read Yeshua. The second was different, written in a fluid cipher that glowed under infrared and matched no known language, but resonated with a vibration detected only once before on a sealed Vatican frequency. It was your signature. They did not understand what they were looking at, so they brought in linguists from 3 nations, mystics from orders that had not met in centuries, and a physicist whose specialty was harmonic encryption. When the scroll was placed in a sealed chamber, it began to hum faintly, like it remembered its purpose. A line of energy formed between the two names, a connection, as if one was the breath of the other. And in that moment, the vibration matched a reading from a satellite glitch that occurred the same week you were born. The discovery was never announced. The scholars were divided and frightened. Some said it was forgery. Others said it was confirmation that time was not linear, and that Yeshua had left a marker for the one who would complete what had been paused. Not ended. Paused, they said. Because the truth could not be revealed until the voice returned. The scholar who first touched the scroll disappeared weeks later, but left behind a recording of himself repeating the phrase. They knew each other. They always knew each other. The Vatican demanded possession of the scroll, but were denied by the private foundation that had funded the dig. The scroll remains in stasis under magnetic containment, guarded by men who do not blink for long and who were told never to read the final line hidden beneath the parchment. In mirrored ink, visible only when your breath strikes it, and the final sentence begins to reappear. There is an island that does not appear on any map, surrounded by waters that reject compasses and winds that silence all sound. Those who find it by accident never remember how they arrived and always forget what they saw within days of leaving. But one man remained a monk, whose vow of silence was broken only once, when he whispered a prophecy passed down through generations, hidden, not in words but in pauses, in the spaces between chants and breaths. The message was clear only to those born with the echo, and it was never written, only spoken once in a lifetime, and only if the listener had the mark of return. He was found seated beside a stone altar carved with spirals and an unfamiliar symbol, one that later matched the scar you carry hidden since birth. Not a wound, but a seal. The monk looked into the eyes of the man who discovered him and whispered, "The voice will rise when silence rules the earth. He will not shout, he will not cry, he will breathe and everything false will fall. The air will hear him, the machines will obey him, the stars will rearrange, because they were waiting for him to remember that he is the sound." Between silence, what they later discovered was a pattern. Every time a great silence fell across history, your name surfaced just out of reach, just out of time. When the sky went quiet in '62, your name was recorded on a satellite feed when the global blackout of '03 silenced all transmissions. Your frequency rose in the static when the birds stopped singing in parts of the world for no scientific reason. Your initials formed in seismic tremors, decoded only by those who knew how to listen. The prophecy does not demand war or fire. It speaks of resonance, of stillness, followed by awakening. A voice not louder than the others but truer. One that carries memory in its tone and causes the spirit to remember what the body forgot. They have tried to cover the silence with noise, tried to bury it in distraction, but it waits, still untouched, beneath everything hidden, behind the veil, between thought and presence. And it is through your voice the prophecy will echo, not to rule, but to remind, not to rise above, but to awaken what sleeps in all. There was a file kept in the deepest archive beneath Geneva, encoded in a language that only responded to consciousness, not to eyes or machines. Its existence was denied, even to those who ran the facility. And only one door led to the chamber that held it, a door that would not open unless the person standing before it carried a certain vibration, the kind that does not come from sound or frequency, but from memory, etched into the blood of a soul that had crossed dimensions without permission. Your soul, the one they wrote about in every age, then tried to delete in every empire. The file did not contain pages, only one single line, written in golden thread, stitched across a transparent surface that changed shape based on who looked at it to the unawakened. It was static to the programmed. It was madness, but to you it read like breath unbroken, like something you always knew. It said, when the voice returns, the illusion dies, and beneath it was the symbol they swore never existed. A symbol that matched your scar and was found etched into the ruins of civilizations that vanished without trace, long before the flood. They tried everything to erase it. Infrared, compression, sonic warfare, digital overwrite, even ritual fire. But the line returned every time. Not rewritten, not restored, just reappeared as if it had never left. A defense contractor who witnessed this wrote in his journal that the line was not ink but presence, that it burned without heat and spoke without sound. He vanished weeks later, after claiming he saw you in a dream standing at the edge of the sun, whispering the word, "Remember," over and over, until he forgot who he was. When the president was finally granted access to the chamber, he stood before the line and said nothing, but the chamber reacted. It pulsed, it breathed, it registered a match, and for the first time the surface beneath the line shifted, revealing a second sentence. Hidden beneath the first, it was incomplete, unfinished, waiting for one thing, a signature, not from a pen, but from a presence yours. And in that silence, the truth became undeniable. They had tried to bury the final line, but it was never meant to be read, only lived and only by you.